Hello and welcome. I'm Orna Ross. I am Director of the Alliance of Independent Authors and the Indie Author Fringe, and I'm an indie author myself. And you are listening to a rough cut for my Go Creative show, which airs each Sunday on Stitcher and iTunes in audio and on YouTube and Vimeo on video. And the whole topic of the Go Creative show is how you can apply the creative process to everything you do in life. We particularly focus on creative writing, creative publishing, but mostly creative living, conscious creation, and creating what you want, making the most of your life and understanding how the process of conscious creation works, and really understanding that it very much rests on the unconscious, because creativity is nothing more than it is paradoxical and a balancing act. It's always balancing two things that seem to be opposing. So today I'm all about creative challenge, and one show in every four focuses on this concept of creative challenge. It's the show in which I talk about my own challenges, what I'm creating and what I'm finding most challenging, and essentially how I'm meeting those challenges, but also yours, the problems, dilemmas, blocks, difficulties that you are experiencing as you go about trying to make the most of yourself. So do feel free, if you would like to be part of the show, if you would like to see your challenge featured, to drop me a line using the contact form on ornaross.com and tell me about what it is you're trying to create and what's maybe getting in your way, and we can explore it. And I'll be doing that a little bit later on in the show with Breda, who's having a money block, which is something we're all familiar with, I think. But first, I'd like to just kind of dig a little bit more deeply into what we're talking about when we talk about creative challenge, and why we phrase it that way, and what it means, and how we meet it, and what it is to meet challenge with a creative mindset in place, rather than a conventional, conceptual kind of mindset, which is, I suppose, what's most current in our society these days, is that you think your way through problems, you work your way through problems. The creative way is a slightly different way. And throughout all the creative living shows, the Go Creative shows, we are constantly talking about can do. In lots of shows, we will be giving 3 can-dos, around a particular theme in writing or in publishing or indeed in living. And so I wanted to talk about that in this introductory episode, because this is a segment of the show that will air on September 11th, which is the second episode of the Go Creative show. The first 4 episodes are essentially an introduction to the concepts that you're going to meet throughout as the show goes on. So today I just want to talk a little bit about the can do and what we're talking about there. So obviously it's positive thinking, which is not a new concept. People have been talking about the merits of positive thinking for at least a century now in self-help and human potential circles. So it's not a new concept, but however, it's no easier today than it was 100 years ago, when the early self-help writers were getting into their swing. And the reason for that is scientists have uncovered that we actually have a negativity bias in us. We all have at this point in time. That may change. It may well arise from the need to identify danger and to, be alert for potential problems in our environment, in our habitat. And that, as an evolutionary sort of advantage, we developed this highly developed sense of fear and caution. And it serves us well in lots and lots of ways, but it also does not serve us so well in other ways. So we tend to ruminate about problems. It's just a function of the human brain. And the issue, though, for the creative impulse and for the things that we want to make, we want to create in the world, is that as soon as we make a creative intention and decide that we want to make something, creative anxiety rises up, and we see all the problems, we see all the potential downfalls, and very often that's enough. We don't even get going. So positive thinking, when it comes to creativity studies, when it comes to going creative, when it comes to being a creativist, somebody who applies the creative process to everything in life, positive thinking in that context is very much about turning around those negative thoughts and posing problems as challenges. Because the second you begin to think about it as a challenge rather than a problem, you begin to think about how you can meet the challenge and how you can use the challenge in a sense to get where you want to go. So a problem is a block, it's something that stops you, but a challenge is something you meet with your energy to transform it and to make something happen. So that's why we will always really talk about the dilemmas, problems, issues, blocks, etc. that we're meeting in terms of challenge, creative challenge. And there are three can-dos. As I said, we'll be talking about, can do this, can do that in relation to all sorts of things. But I want to talk about the can-dos, the fundamental can-dos themselves when it comes to creativity. And they are three. First is explaining. So how you explain, I've just given an example there, how you explain something to yourself as a problem is one sort of explanation. And as a challenge is a different sort of explanation. So you begin your problem with the explanation to yourself. Then the second one is exploration, exploring the problem and the challenge, seeing what it's actually made up of, seeing if the things you're telling yourself about it are true. And then the third thing is experiment. So just to talk a little bit in more detail with an explanation, an example, I should say. Jenna came to me recently with a problem as she saw it. She is a young woman who has a fantastic business idea. It really is. It's under wraps at the moment, so I can't say what it is, but it really is an exciting digital-based business. But Jenna, like many of us who are creating one thing, we're also in day jobs, and she has 2 young children, she's got a life, and she's got all sorts of things going on. And her problem was, I don't have time to write my business plan and make my funding application. They were the 2 things that she kind of needs to do for the next bit to happen for her. And so we began then with the 3 can-dos. The first one, we looked at her explanation of that to herself. So when we're looking at explanation and how we're explaining something, the first thing we ask ourselves is it true? So we're feeding ourselves a line about what our problem is, and Jenna's in this case was, I don't have time to write my business plan. I suggested to her that, given that she has a day job, which is 9 to 5, not terribly onerous job, so not a highly demanding job, but it is definitely a presenteeism job. She has to go into work and sit at the desk and be there 9 to 5 with a lunch break from 1 to 2. So, and then she goes home to her 2 young children in the evening and her husband. So I was suggesting to her that really the only times she had available were before work in the morning or at lunchtime. And she just said, I can't write at lunchtime. My head is in work mode. I can't switch over into my creative mode around my business. And so the first thing we do when we look at an explanation to ourselves like that is ask ourselves, is that true? Is it actually true? The line you're feeding yourself about why you can't do what you can't do, is it actually true? And secondly, is it serving you? Is it a useful thing to tell yourself? And then thirdly, if you weren't feeding yourself that version of events, so that version of how things are, if you turned it on its head, turned it around, and Byron Katie, I always call her that the wrong way around, is somebody who has actually made an entire sort of approach to living, or which she calls the work, simply on that idea, on that concept of turning it around and asking yourself, actually, is the opposite equally true? And very often you find that it is. Very often you find that the reason you're giving yourself, the explanation you're presenting to yourself as to why you can't do what you want to do, is a form, it's a sophisticated form of resistance. And in some cases not sophisticated at all, but very often it's quite a sophisticated form of resistance. It's actually fear. There's fear of finishing, there's fear of putting yourself out there, there's fear of losing face, there's fear of what other people might think, there's fear of failure, there's fear of success. 1,000 fears rise up when we decide that we are going to create something new, because it means we've got to change, and there's that part of us that just does not like to change, and that is the part that throws up all these ideas and concepts about why we can't do the thing that we most want to do. And so that's the second part of the can do, is the exploration, the true exploration of your explanation, the true exploration of what is really going on, digging a little bit deeper. Now, here's where free writing comes in. It's a fantastic tool for actually getting beyond what you're telling yourself, getting beyond the surface explanation to the deeper explanation of what's really going on. So you begin your free writing very often telling yourself your problem, writing it out, maybe with a great deal of emotion or sadness or anger or frustration, or, you know, beating yourself up or whatever. You begin there, and as you move more deeply into the free writing, as the unconscious mind surfaces beyond the surface complaints, you begin to get to the deeper explanation. You begin to realize, uh-oh, I'm actually telling myself this, because it's easier to tell myself this than it is to actually face in and do what I need to do. So Jenna, in fairness, we just very quickly, you know, within seconds actually, she was turning it around. She was saying, it's not at all true that I can't do my creative work on my lunch break. In fact, I would look forward to lunch if I did that. Maybe not every day. So she settled on Monday, Wednesday and Friday. She will actually do her creative work. Tuesday and Thursday, she's just going to pass off, read a book and, you know, do what she generally, go shopping and do what she usually does at lunchtime. And she's gone off to do that, and I'm pretty sure she's going to be happy with that. So what you do after you've done the explanation and turned it around and had a look at it and explored it and found out what's really underneath and what the true explanation is you begin to experiment. You begin to say, the third can do, you can experiment. You know, approach it and see, if I try it this way, how does it go? So if Jenna will try her Monday, Wednesday and Friday and see, does she actually get her business plan done? And maybe find, actually, lunch hours, by the time, you know, I get around to it, by the time I've eaten, I just don't have enough time to get into the swing of things. What I'm actually going to have to do is maybe get up an hour earlier or an hour and a half earlier and get into work early and do it beforehand, perhaps. But while you're experimenting and trying something out, you're moving. You're making progress. While you're sitting there telling yourself that you can't do something, you're stuck. And so creation is always doing. And that's what when you experiment, you're doing something. You're not thinking about it. You're actually doing something. So there are 3 can-dos. If you have a block or problem that seems insoluble right now, just try approaching it with the explanation to yourself, turning it around and seeing if it actually is that, exploring in depth what's really going on, and then experimenting with an intention that would arise out of your exploration. So you explain and explore, and out of that you say, I'm going to do X, Y, or Z, and then you experiment with that creative intention. Give that a go, and I'd love to hear how you get on. You can drop me a line at ornaross.com. And in the next segment, we'll be talking to Breda, who has a money block that she wants to uncover. Thanks for listening. Till we meet again, let's go create.